Most people stockpiling canned food are making at least 3 of these 7 mistakes right now and do not know it. The mistakes are not obvious. They involve specific food categories, specific storage conditions, and specific purchasing habits that seem correct until you understand why they are not. Mistake 1. Treating high-acid and low-acid cans as the same product. The first mistake is stockpiling high-acid canned foods at the same volumes as low-acid canned foods without understanding that they are fundamentally different products from a shelf life perspective. The USDA distinguishes clearly between high-acid canned foods, which include tomatoes, tomatoes-based products, citrus, vinegar-based pickled items, and most canned fruits, and low-acid canned foods, which include meats, beans, corn, peas, carrots, and most vegetables without vinegar. The USDA recommended quality shelf life for high-acid canned goods runs 12 to 18 months, compared to 2 to 5 years for low-acid products. Beyond that, high-acid content creates a slow corrosion reaction with the metal can lining that, while not immediately dangerous in intact cans, gradually degrades the quality and nutritional value of the contents at a rate that is much faster than what most preppers assume when they stock cases of canned tomatoes alongside cases of canned beans and treat them identically. The practical implication is that a case of canned diced tomatoes purchased in 2024 for a 2030 emergency may open to discolored metallic tasting contents that nobody wants to eat, while a case of canned black beans from the same purchase date will still be perfectly edible. Stock high-acid canned foods for rotation and near-term use, not for multi-year emergency reserves. Practically keep high-acid canned goods on a 12-month rotation cycle the same way you would any opened pantry item, and reserve the bulk of your long-term emergency storage volume for low-acid proteins and vegetables where the indefinite safety window is real rather than theoretical. Mistake 2. Storing in the garage or near heat sources. The second mistake is storing canned food in the garage, the basement near the furnace, or anywhere in the home where temperatures regularly exceed 75 degrees Fahrenheit during summer months. The USDA's guidance on home canning and food storage explicitly states that canned goods should be stored between 50 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit for maximum quality retention, and that temperatures above 90 degrees Fahrenheit can cause food to spoil in as little as a few weeks, even in sealed cans. This matters because the garage is where most preppers initially put their overflow food storage. And in most of the continental United States, a garage in July or August easily reaches 90 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit for several hours each afternoon. Every month a can spends at those temperatures accelerates the quality degradation curve that determines whether the food is actually edible when needed. A case of canned chicken stored correctly in a 65-degree pantry for 5 years has genuinely different contents than the same can stored in a hot garage for the same period. The USDA's temperature guidance is not a suggestion. It is the primary variable controlling whether a canned food stockpile is a real resource or an eventual science experiment. A thermometer left in the storage area through a full summer tells you the actual temperature range your canned goods are experiencing, not the temperature you assume they are experiencing. Mistake 3. Stacking new cans in front of old ones. The third mistake is buying new cans and stacking them in front of the existing supply instead of behind it, which is a rotation failure that compounds silently over months and years until the oldest cans in the back of the supply are significantly past their quality window, while the household continues eating from the fresh front stock. The correct method is called first in, first out, abbreviated FIFO in food service and inventory management, which means new purchases go to the back and oldest cans come to the front for use. In a well-managed canned food stockpile, every can that comes out of the supply for normal household cooking is replaced by a new can that goes to the back, creating a continuous rotation where nothing sits untouched indefinitely. Most preppers build their stockpile by buying extra and storing it separately from normal household food, and then never actually eating from the stockpile at all, which means in 3 to 5 years, the entire supply is simultaneously at or past its quality window rather than being continuously refreshed. The stockpile should not be separate from the household food supply. It should be the household food supply, just in larger volume. Building a simple can rack, a slanted shelf where cans roll forward as they are used and new cans are loaded at the back, removes the decision and discipline requirement from rotation entirely and makes correct, First in, first out behavior, automatic. Mistake 4, building a high sodium supply without proportional water storage. The fourth mistake is building a canned food stockpile that is heavily concentrated in high sodium products without a corresponding increase in stored water supply. A realistic emergency diet drawn primarily from the canned goods most people stockpile, including canned soup, canned vegetables in brine, canned beans with salt, canned meats packed with sodium, and canned stews, can easily deliver 4,000 to 6,000 milligrams of dietary sodium per day, which is nearly twice the maximum daily intake the American Heart Association recommends. The human kidneys respond to elevated sodium intake by increasing urine output to maintain electrolyte balance, which directly increases daily water requirements above the standard 1 gallon per person per day that most emergency preparedness guides recommend. In a scenario where water is already a constrained resource, a high sodium diet from a heavily salted canned food supply actively worsens the water constraint and creates dehydration risk even when adequate water appears to be available. The solution is either selecting lower sodium versions of canned products when available, rinsing canned beans and vegetables before eating to remove a significant portion of the sodium in the packing liquid, or increasing stored water proportionally to the sodium load of the planned emergency diet. This is one of the most practical arguments for stocking dried beans instead of or alongside canned beans as a core protein source, because dried beans contain no added sodium at all and can be prepared at whatever salt level the cook decides, rather than arriving pre-salted at a level optimized for flavor, rather than for health or water conservation. Mistake 5, relying on pull tab cans and electric openers. The fifth mistake is not having and maintaining a manual can opener and defaulting to either electric can openers or pull-tab cans as the primary method for accessing stored food. Pull-tab cans, which are the easy open cans with the ring on top that do not require a separate opener, use a scored aluminum lid that is convenient under normal conditions but is significantly more vulnerable to corrosion and seal degradation in storage conditions involving temperature, fluctuation, or humidity than traditional double-seam cans opened with a mechanical opener. Long-term food storage specialists and the general consensus in preparedness communities is that traditional cans with mechanical double-seam lids store more reliably over years because the seal mechanism is more robust. Beyond the can type question, relying on a single electric can opener without a manual backup creates a single point of failure that disables access to the entire canned food supply during a power outage, which is exactly the scenario most canned food stockpiles are intended to address. A quality hand crank can opener costs under $10 and should be stored alongside the food supply itself, not in a kitchen drawer where it might not be accessible if the primary storage area is an off-site or basement location. The manual can opener should also be verified to actually work with the specific cans in the stockpile before it is needed, because not all can opener designs work equally well on all can sizes and lid thicknesses, and discovering an incompatibility during an actual emergency when the food inside the can is critically needed is the wrong time for a hardware test. Mistake 6. Buying number 10, cans for a small household. The sixth mistake is buying large institutional size cans, particularly the number 10 cans that contain roughly 96 ounces or 6 pounds of food for a single person or two-person household without a plan for using the entire contents before it spoils after opening. A number 10 can of canned beans opened in an off-grid emergency scenario without refrigeration presents a practical problem. The entire 6-pound contents must be consumed within 3 to 4 days at room temperature before spoilage becomes a concern, which means a small household is either wasting a significant portion of each can or eating beans at every meal for 4 days to avoid that waste. Standard consumer size cans of 14 to 16 ounces represent a portion size that a 1 or 2 person household can realistically consume in a single meal, which is the correct unit size for emergency eating, where waste and food management are real considerations rather than inconveniences. Number 10 cans are appropriate for households of 6 or more, or for preppers who are stockpiling for a group or community, not for individual or couple households building a personal emergency supply. Consumer-sized cans also make it easier to maintain variety in a stockpile because the lower per unit cost allows purchasing across a wider range of protein and vegetable options for the same same total budget, rather than concentrating spending in fewer but larger containers. Mistake 7. Never actually eating from the stockpile before an emergency. The 7th mistake is stockpiling an emergency food supply without periodically eating from it in a realistic simulation of the dietary conditions it is meant to support. Most preppers never actually eat their emergency food supply as their sole food source for even a single day, which means they do not discover until an actual emergency that many people experience significant digestive disruption when their diet suddenly shifts to a high-fiber, high-sodium, low-fresh food composition that is fundamentally different from their normal eating patterns. Intestinal distress, constipation, and the psychological difficulty of eating the same limited rotation of foods repeatedly are real and documented outcomes of sudden diet change under stress, and discovering these issues for the first time during an actual emergency when additional resources are unavailable is a significantly worse outcome than discovering them during a planned one-week trial at home. Eating from the actual stockpile for 3 to 5 days periodically also serves the rotation function, tests the real palatability of the supply, and identifies gaps in the planned diet that exist on paper but only become obvious when someone is actually eating it. The trial period also serves a secondary purpose of identifying any medications, supplements, or dietary accommodations that interact poorly with a high canned food diet before those interactions become a medical issue during an actual emergency. The single most commonly reported surprise from preppers who actually run this kind of simulation is that they consume far less food per day than they expected when physical activity and stress are factored in, and the planned supply turns out to last longer than the paper calculations suggested. 7 specific mistakes, and everyone is fixable before any emergency arrives. Start with rotation and storage temperature, because those two affect every can already on your shelf right now. Subscribe for the next video on which canned foods have the best actual shelf life data.